Who touched this wheelchair? I must take your fingerprints for the investigation.
You're a cop, you're taking fingerprints. What could be more normal?
Thanks. I need you to enlighten me on a point. Sorry, but I understand nothing about architecture. I would like to have some things in this sketchbook explained.
The tower was designed according to all the rules of the art, and with respect for anti-seismic norms, according to its initial dimensions. It wasn't designed for Walter Jones's newest whims, you understand? Jones wanted to add 10 new floors to the tower. He asked me to do a study to reinforce the foundation with this unexpected additional burden, but I knew it was impossible. It was totally impossible. Today, the risk of it sinking is real.
What relations did you maintain with Jones?
Our points of view diverged, and our relationship became tense, to say the least. And today, I find myself trapped in this position as a manager. Oh, I've no doubt that I shouldn't have accepted the job, Norm.
What did you do after having received the orders to continue the construction from Jones?
I wasn't very reassured by the opinion of the experts, who didn't even take the trouble to come to Sagora, but I agreed to resume the construction anyway. Then, to strengthen the tower in order to save it, despite Jones's raving megalomania, well, I was the only one who could do it. The tower, you see, it's my life's work, you understand?
My stomach is growling. It's the moment to go and get a bite to eat. Here we go, an efficient meal. I need your assistance to clarify certain points. Lorenzo, what did you do after receiving the new orders from Walter Jones asking you to stop the construction?
I was patient, Norm. I waited for Jones to come back to his senses and to finally understand my predictions about the instability of the tower. That came with this letter. Even if I don't like unfinished work, it was a reasonable decision.
Why did I find this in your things, Lorenzo? I expect to find this kind of paper in Nolan's office.
Nolan put me in charge of firing the employees. He just gave me the file that comes with it.
For what reason was the hotel staff fired?
Mr. Jones had hired these Maledivians to please Collio, and he thereby hoped to have him abandon the lawsuit he'd filed against Jones to drive him out of Sagora. After that, he was quick to be rid of them. That's how Mr. Jones treated people. And now I'm faced with the maintenance of the tower on my shoulders alone.
What happened to the maintenance staff of the tower after that?
I don't know anything, Norm. All I know is that Collio's friends were fired like dirt. It's now been 15 days.
A hotel of this size, deprived of all its staff. It's a darn problem, I'd say.
Tell me about it, Norm. I think the way the friends of old man Colio were fired from here was utterly scandalous. And so all the dirty work has fallen on me. I can't take care of the maintenance of this tower all by myself, can I? So, as Jones asked before he died, the heirs would only have the same standing as local personnel who'd been withdrawn. An excellent occasion to prove that they're not idlers and good-for-nothings. Each one had to contribute to the housework.
I don't understand why Walter Jones continued to construct the tower after this verdict.
I don't understand either. I knew that he was taking risks by continuing to build like this. But what do you want? I mean, I was his architect, not his attorney.
Walter Jones was cheated well and good. But did he appeal this judgment?
You have to know how to lose. Mr. Jones did not swindle.
Jones was not the type to take a verdict like this lying down. What's the status of the appeal?
Nolant is an old fox, and the natives of the island had better look out for the worst, in spite of the verdict that was given in their favor.
Walter Jones gave this to Baina, didn't he? What were the bonds that connected them?
Jones hoped that the gifts would make Baina forgive him for the suffering he'd caused her. That boor thought she was his future wife.
You're taking me for a ride, Mr. Battaglieri. Tell me now what you were doing in the rocks last night.
I'm not taking you for a ride. Let's see. Well, it is true that I was hiding in the rocks. On leaving the restaurant with Mr. Jones, I knew that he was going to meet Baina, and I hated seeing her with him. I said goodbye to Jones under the pretext that I absolutely had to collect the lobster pots that had been damaged by the storm the previous night. I took the elevator to go down to the first-floor lobby, and then I ran to the Belvedere. I followed Walter Jones on the dirt path of the Tortoise Belvedere. Then I hid in the rocks from where I saw him stop under the arbor, which was lit, not far from the cliff. It's the place where Baina meets Jones. Baina, who had seen Jones, joined him, and she walked behind his wheelchair. When they arrived at the edge of the cliff, Jones harassed Baina, who pushed him to defend herself. Well, I saw the wheelchair lurch forward and then teeter over the edge. Then I got out of my hiding place and I went close to the edge of the cliff and I saw Jones inert in his wheelchair amidst the rocks. His head was covered with blood, and I thought that he was dead. I immediately came back to try to reassure poor Baina. Then I quickly left the place for fear of being seen. I went back up to my studio. Let me confide something in you, Norm. I'm ashamed I left without informing anyone. I only wanted to protect Baina and not get mixed up in all this.
According to you, how could Baina have lost pearls from her necklace?
I have no idea, but I want to point out that there is absolutely nothing to prove that she lost them last night, if that's what you're thinking, Inspector. She came by here often, you know.
It seems that Baina accompanied Walter Jones to the Tortoise Belvedere, but she would have been careful not to leave her footprints if she had deliberately planned to kill Jones.
I'm sure you're right, Norm. Baina is far from stupid. She would have handled it differently if she had wanted to kill Walter Jones.
What was Hubert de Nolant doing at the Belvedere of the Tortoise last night?
I now remember that I ran into him at the foot of the tower when I went back up after having tried to gather the lobster traps. He was in quite a rush and he didn't even say hello.
Hubert de Nolant treats you like an incompetent amateur.
Of course. But you should know, Inspector, that Nolant and Jones were the only people responsible for the malfunctioning of this tower. And I've got proof of that.
Some people here say that you are totally incompetent.
The tower was never completed, so obviously nothing works as it should.
I'm surprised that Colio, even if he was angry at Jones, was not more grateful for his generosity.
Jones was a very practical man, you see, and I really doubt that his gifts to Colio were sincere.
What do these gifts from Jones hide? Why did he want to assure the future of Collio and his daughter?
Listen, Norm, I don't know what Jones wanted to do for Baina and Collio, and also I don't want to know.
So, tell me a little about Billy.
Billy's a gambler, Inspector, so he knows the real values of life. I hope he finds a way out of his financial problems soon.
What do you think of Christina?
Ah, Christina, the charming Slav, the celebration of beauty, passion, fury. Oh, yeah, Inspector. Christina is one of those women who makes us turn our heads, poor men that we are.
I would love it if you could tell me a little about Sonia.
Sonia is a free woman, Inspector. A modern, intelligent, independent woman. She successfully managed to get out of Walter Jones's gilded cage.
What do you think of Collio?
He's a brave man. A man who is deeply passionate about justice and preoccupied with the future of the Maledivians. I like him very much. I have great admiration for him, Inspector.
What do you think of Baina?
The young Baina is a miracle of beauty and unfathomable mystery, Inspector. Since that terrible accident that made her mute, I find her even more fascinating.
Can you tell me more about the circumstances of this accident, please?
Walter Jones had taken Baina to the top of Hawita. It's a sort of sacred rock that's meant for the natives' religious ceremonies. I imagine that Walter Jones must have lured Baina to the very top on some pretext or other. He tried to misbehave with her. She fought back, and they both fell. A terrible fall in the rocks. Baina miraculously escaped with a few scratches, but she was traumatized by the event, and since then she no longer speaks. As for Walter Jones, as of that day, he was paralyzed in both legs.
I would like to know more about Martin.
Martin Abruzzi is haughty and disdainful, Inspector. He pretends to be a courteous and well-raised man, but I'm not fooled. I don't really care for him, to tell you the truth.
What can you tell me about Marco?
Marco Jones? The real son of his grandfather. Selfish, lazy, self-righteous, and corrupt to boot. He's a sycophant, Inspector.
What can you tell me about Clara?
Clara is a sincere and courageous woman, Inspector. And moreover, a woman who loves a gambler can be nothing but a formidable woman.
Very interesting, really. I must take your fingerprints for the investigation.
But of course, do your job, Inspector.
Thanks.
What can I do for you, Inspector?
Excuse me. I'll come back to see you.
Ask all the questions you'd like to ask. I'm at your service.
Do you know anything about medicine?
No, I don't know anything about medicine.
In that case, you can't help me.
Well, we're here without the boss now.
Yes, but these things happen, don't they?
Of course. And what are you counting on doing after all this?
I still have work to do here. I have to organize Walter Jones's affairs and take care of the estate. After that, I'll go and offer my services elsewhere. That's it. And you, Lorenzo?
This tower really took all my energy and all my time. I have a hard time thinking of myself outside of Segura. You know what I mean. So in fact, I don't really know what I'm going to do.
You have time, Lorenzo. Don't worry.
I must take your fingerprints for the investigation.
You want my fingerprints, Jack. It's amusing, but it's also very messy, Jack.
Thanks.
I love interrogations. If I speak bad, Then you correct me, right, Jack?
Jack? Jack, it's you. Why don't you answer my messages? Where are you?
Whoa, don't hang up, honey. I'll take your call in my room. Sorry, I was very busy all day, darling. How are you?
You told me you'd be back this evening, Jack.
No, I can't. I really don't have a choice. I have a murder on my hands here, my sweetheart. It's a complicated case, and I don't think I'll be able to solve it quickly. I'm on an island, you see, and there are a few possible suspects. So as soon as I can, I'll hop on a plane and meet you again in Malibu. Okay, my beautiful? Yeah, me too. I love you.
Lorenzo, do you want to help me open this machine? My laundry's stuck inside and it's blocked.
Let's see. Can't be a big deal. The door's not opening. The lights are all off. Oh, okay. Well, it must be some problem with the electric supply. I'll take care of it, Sonia.
Will it be a while?
To tell you the truth, I haven't the slightest idea.
I must take your fingerprints for the investigation.
If one absolutely has to go through this, let's do it.
Thanks. I just have some questions to ask you. What is this pyramid, then?
Ah, Mr. Norm, here you've come to the right person. It's a Malediven pyramid that the locals of the archipelago call Hawita. It's a sacred place for them, and some anthropologists see it as a ritual site for the first Hittite colonies in the Indian Ocean.
I'm surprised that Colio, even if he was angry at Jones, was not more grateful for his generosity.
I wasn't aware that my grandfather gave gifts to this man.
Walter Jones gave this to Baina, didn't he? What were the bonds that connected them?
I never took to this girl. She plays people to make herself interesting and to attract men. She's a schemer interested in money. That's what I think.
I'm told that an accident left Baina mute. What is that about?
I only know that my grandfather fell with Baina from a place on the island, and that they both came out of it rather badly. I don't know the reasons and circumstances, and I prefer not to know.
Lorenzo said that you succeeded in getting out of your golden cage. What was he talking about exactly?
You know, Inspector, it's not easy to be the granddaughter of a billionaire who is authoritarian, a megalomaniac, and perverted. I always forced myself to keep a distance from the tyrant.
If Noland is to be believed, the young Baina literally cast a spell on Walter Jones. What do you know about this?
Mr. Norm, I don't have any illusions about my grandfather's morality, and Baina is far from being stupid. She knows that Walter Jones is a very rich man, and I believe she's very capable of using her charms with some talent.
What reasons could Billy have had for hating his grandfather?
For hating him? Plenty. For killing him? If that's where you want to go, none. Walter Jones never liked the side of him that was irresponsible and gambled, and he told him more than once. Billy is sometimes in dire financial straits, and our grandfather never helped him. That's why they didn't get along. But I'll tell you again, my brother is a peach and would never hurt a soul.
So, tell me a little about Billy.
I love my brother, Inspector, but he worries me sometimes. He loves to gamble too much, and I'm afraid that he's throwing his career to the wind because of this.
What do you think of Christina?
Christina's body is an asset. I suppose it hasn't escaped you, Inspector. And she knows perfectly well how to make the most of what nature has given her. She seduces with the same ease with which others breathe.
What do you think of Colio?
Colio Jumhu? He's a wily old man whom my grandfather was obliged to compromise with. He enjoys an indisputable mystique with the indigenous people of the region.
What do you think of Baina?
She's apparently a charming bird of the islands, unfortunately totally bereft of conversation.
I would like to know more about Martin.
Martin is my husband, and I'm happy with him, Inspector. All is said, or almost. I admire my husband, and I admire his professional courage. It's not a secret. Martin has financial problems with his publishing firm, but I am by his side.
What can you tell me about Marco?
Marco is my darling younger brother, Inspector. What else can I tell you? I will always be there for him, no matter what happens.
What can you tell me about Clara?
I like my sister-in-law very much, Inspector. Clara reminds me of my grandmother, Anna Jones. The same kindness.
Sure, I see. I will certainly be able to use this for something. This could be useful. I must take your fingerprints for the investigation.
I guess that in an investigation, it's an unquestionable classic.
Thanks.
I assume you want to question me. So go on then.
What do you think of Christina?
Christina? A Russian model lost here in Segura. Quite a picture, isn't it? I don't really know her, Inspector. Except, of course, what everyone can see.
What can you tell me about Marco?
I hardly know my brother-in-law, Inspector, but what I do know of him is very positive. I appreciate him a lot. He is someone to reckon with, as they say.
If Noland is to be believed, the young Baina literally cast a spell on Walter Jones. What do you know about this?
How would I know that? The girl is very pretty. That must have been enough.
Surely.